Hello and welcome to Beyond Code, Harnessing GenAI's Full Potential Across the SDLC. Today's webinar is sponsored by Harness and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you. So we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. So not only will we have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event, but we'll also take some questions during the live event as well. Now that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A. And we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link about next generation CI/CD and another one that gets into more detail about Harness's AI native software delivery. So I encourage you to access those resources now or at any time during the presentation, and feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom, and you'll find the link with the details there. And last but not least, we have one of the best benefits of these events is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So after the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's presentation and demos. So I'm excited now to bring on our expert presenters. We have Rohan Gupta, who's product manager for CD AI and the DevOps assistant. We also have Patrick Wolf, product manager for the code repository AI code assistant. And last but not least, we have our acting MC, Chinmay Gaikwad, who's product marketing manager for code repository CI and AI assistant. Let me bring everybody on here. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Scott, for the introduction. Excited to be here.
Well,
Chinmay, thanks a lot.
Chinmay, I'll just turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott. Hey, everyone. I am super excited to be here for a couple of reasons. The first one being we are going to talk about cutting-edge technology, generative AI. And the second being I work at a company that invests exhaustively in such technologies, which enables us to show you these in real life. So definitely a great session to look forward to. And with that, I would like to call on Patrick and Rohan just to give a brief introduction about yourselves.
I can go first. Nice to meet y'all. My name is Rohan Gupta. I'm one of the product managers here at Harness. I work on the CD product, and we're now taking it to the next level with this AI DevOps assistant. So excited to share with you guys what we're working on.
Thanks, Rohan. I'm Patrick Wolf. I've been involved in SCMs for quite a while. I was working on Subversion and now Git for quite a while, and I'm very excited about all the new things that AI is introducing into the dev workflow and just the collaboration in general. So excited to share some of that with you guys today.
Thanks, Patrick and Rohan. So let's get started. So a few things that we hope you get out of this session. The first one being we'll talk about the current state of Gen AI. It's very focused on coding right now. So we'll touch on it, if it's effective, and what are the use cases being handled right now. Then we'll go into how Gen AI can actually be used in different stages. What are the best use cases for Gen AI in different stages of SDLC? And then we'll also go into how we at Harness approach Gen AI. What is our philosophy around Gen AI? And then, as Rohan and Patrick mentioned, we'll also have a demo of some of our Gen AI features It's not an exhaustive demo, but we'll definitely show you some clips of what we have working behind the scenes. Cool. So let's get started with GenAI in coding. As you all must be knowing, GenAI has made a huge splash, and most of the focus has been on developers, on how to make developers more productive. And there are a lot of use cases for GenAI being handled out there right now by a lot of different companies. Some of the examples are code suggestions. So GenAI is extremely good at understanding code. So once you give it a right prompt, it can give you the right suggestions for the code. GenAI is also good at explaining the code. So there are a lot of use cases where you can select a piece of code and ask GenAI what it does, and it gives you mostly accurate suggestions or explanations. Because it is good at understanding the code, you can also ask GenAI to refactor the code for something that does not have security issues or does not have a lot of bugs. And then finally, GenAI is also good at creating unit tests. Just because it understands the code, you can select the code and ask GenAI to create a unit test for that particular piece of code. So we tried to figure out if GenAI is actually useful. So this is a great Stack Overflow developer survey. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend going through this survey. As you can see, developers, for the most part, have found benefits of using GenAI in coding. And most of the benefits have been around increasing productivity or speeding up learning. So definitely there are positive signs for GenAI to be used for code generation, specifically for developers. So what are the good characteristics of tasks that GenAI can handle? There have been a few tasks that GenAI does really well, and there are some characteristics around those tasks that we have identified. And it is basically around eliminating toil. So how do you define toil? What are the characteristics of a toil? So toil essentially is something that is manual. So you take a lot of effort to actually complete the task. It is repetitive, so it comes across as a repetitive task. So it takes a lot of your time and effort. And then it also requires a lot of context switching. And it can be automated. So that's one positive about tasks with toil. And it lacks enduring value, which basically means that if engineers complete those tasks, they don't really feel rewarded. If you are interested in learning more about toil, there is a great handbook from Google around SRE. It's called the SRE book. Definitely recommend reading that, and you'll get to learn a lot about how, specifically in the world of SREs, you can eliminate toil. Okay, so now that we have handled GenAI in the coding part of the world, let's look at how GenAI can be used across the software development lifecycle. So just for this particular session, I've kept the SDLC cycle very simple. I know a lot of you work on really complex SDLC cycles, but this is the simplest representation that I could come up with. So essentially, from left to right, developers start writing code, then they push the code in code repos, then that code gets built, gets tested, and then finally it gets deployed. So this is the simple SDLC cycle that we'll be focusing on today. And we talked a lot about how GenAI is being used for coding purposes. So how developers use GenAI and what are the different use cases. But how much time do developers actually spend on writing code? It's less than half. And if you look at the recent Amazon or AWS reInvent surveys, it's actually 1 hour per day. So that's not quite a lot. So there are a lot of things that the developers focus on, which GenAI can be used for. It's a similar story with engineering managers. Even less time is spent on coding, and a lot of other time is spent on some of the manual tasks or toil tasks. And finally, DevOps engineering managers or DevOps managers also spend a lot less time in coding, but there is a lot of other stuff that they do across the SDLC wherein GenAI can be used. And there are very few companies that are focusing on the problems across SDLC. So as you can see in this graphic, a lot of companies are actually only focusing on the writing code part of the toil. However, it's a small portion, as we saw from the previous data. So there's a lot of opportunity to decrease toil across the SDLC if we could focus on that. Okay, so let's start talking about what are the toil tasks across SDLC by going through each stage of SDLC. So let's focus on code repos for now. Some of the examples of reducing toil around code repos is searching for code. So whenever a new developer gets onboarded, the onboarding time really depends on the developer's ability to understand the code, where the code lies, and stuff like that. And searching for code is extremely laborious because keyword search really doesn't help developers understand where the exact code lives. So for example, if a developer wants to understand where the login screen was created, they will try to look for a keyword called login, but login can be used across different scenarios across the board. So they won't really get relevant results. So this is where GenAI can be extremely useful. GenAI can be used in combination of natural language to ask questions like, where does the login screen exist? And you'd get very accurate answers, much more accurate than just keyword search. The other task that can be eliminated using GenAI is summarizing PRs. GenAI is really good at reading code as well as understanding natural language. So this is the great combination that exists when somebody reviews a PR. So GenAI can be used to summarize PRs in this case. Patrick, you have worked on code repos for quite a long time. Any thoughts to add on this? I think you might be muted, Patrick.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Apologies for that. What I was saying is a lot of the stuff we've mentioned very briefly already. So a lot of time with coders, they will spend time context switching between looking up new libraries, going to Stack Overflow, figuring out how things are going to be done. And a lot of that toil and research can also be automated and built into these code assistants, so they don't have to go do context switching all day. And as was mentioned with searching for code, it's not necessarily about just finding the keywords, but it's about finding the semantic meaning of that code and understanding that code. And a lot of the code assistant isn't just about code completion. It's about helping the developer understand the code they're working on, especially if it's a new code base or they're a junior developer and they don't have a lot of experience. It'll help them craft that code and write what they're expecting based on the use cases for that. And another large benefit is the ability to do test generation, as Chinmay mentioned before, both unit test and, as we'll see later, some of the integration test as well, and just building that testing framework around it, so they don't have to do that manually. I know as a developer, I don't like writing tests, and I think a lot of other people don't as well, and having that ability to just quickly generate those tests is a big win.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Let's move on to the build stage. For the build stage, whenever the PR is checked in, builds are triggered, and a few examples of toil that can be eliminated on the build stage are pipeline creation. Whenever a new code is being built, the starting point to create a pipeline is extremely tricky. You need to figure out which language is it for, what is the architecture, what kind of operating system does it require, what are the dependencies. There's so many permutations and combinations, and something might go wrong. So essentially, pipeline creation is something that AI can be really helpful with because it understands the code and the context of the code. And then the other use case would be debugging the pipeline failures. So whenever a pipeline fails, and pipelines fail all the time, AI can be actually used to go through the pipeline failures and figure out why the pipeline is failing exactly, and also provide recommendations. Rohan, you have worked on CI/CD for years now. Anything to add here?
Yeah, I think the key thing is what you mentioned earlier around pipeline creation. We see, based off users of CI tools and CD tools, being able to build the code based off specific tech stacks is very manual today. You have to kind of come up with various patterns and then have some sort of automation to stitch it. With Gen AI, what we're seeing is because we understand the languages in your repositories, we understand some of the patterns that you require to build a pipeline to meet your standards. Gen AI can actually be leveraged very significantly to create these dynamic pipelines based off your guidelines, essentially. And so you'll have an instance of this pipeline that can really help you build, and without any developer going in and actually manually creating it, or an administrator actually kind of pre-stitching it. You can give it some minimal requirements and it can understand, what that pipeline, that stage, that step needs to look like. And then on top of that, the next part of the problem where we see someone trying to understand what the failures are, it's easy to just copy paste that into a chat GPT or an open tool to get a basic response. But what you miss out is the context, essentially. And that is what the beauty of Gen AI lets us do, is we can pump in all that context of your repos and pipelines and give you a tailored response to what the real issue is.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. Testing is a tricky one. I know a few people who love testing, but for the most part, there are people who have either hate testing or have no response to testing. Testing is tricky just because it's very hard to automate, just because the applications are so dynamic in nature these days that if you automate a particular test, they are bound to get broken because of the dynamic nature of applications. So some of the examples in testing that GenAI can be useful for is creating tests for dynamic data. Test maintenance is another issue which we have seen across the industry, and GenAI can definitely be useful in that. Running relevant tests is very interesting. Whenever a build is triggered, all the unit tests are run, which takes a lot of time for the build to complete. So just finding out which tests have been touched because of that particular pull request is something that GenAI can be really useful with. And then finally, on the security side of things, GenAI can also go through the database of security issues and figure out which issues exist in your particular code. And then it also can provide recommendations to fix those issues. So developers who are not very familiar with security can actually leverage GenAI and get recommendations for vulnerabilities. And then finally, similar to what Rohan mentioned, debugging pipeline failures is something that GenAI can be really good at. And also verifying deployment status, if their deployment has been successful or not, by using metrics and pumping in a lot of data, is something that GenAI can do very efficiently. Cool. So we have seen a lot of use cases of GenAI. Let's look at how Harness approaches this and what our philosophy is around GenAI. So there are two loops, as you might be familiar with. The inner loop, which focuses on highly creative tasks such as developing secure code, solving problems, designing, reviews, coaching, etc. And then there is an outer loop, which is basically the toil that we talked about. So tasks such as building code, deploying code, trying to debug issues and stuff like that, which take up a lot of time, are in the outer loop. We at Harness focus on the outer loop and make sure that the outer loop is as short as possible. We also make sure that your AI is ready for use. Because we are an enterprise first company, privacy is extremely important to us. So training of the data and the AI authorship is extremely important. So we try to make sure that whenever you use AI, it's stress-free. Our goal with Harness AI is to make sure that your software delivery is as fast as possible and as good as possible, and thus we can actually help you modernize your delivery using GenAI. We have had a long history of AI. So even before GenAI was a thing, we invested a lot in AI. And it started off in 2018 with continuous verification, where we used machine learning models to automatically verify the impact of deployments in CD pipelines. This feature is called continuous verification, and it is extremely popular. A lot of our customers love it, and in this way, they can have stress-free deployments. On the CI side of things, we introduced test intelligence. As I was mentioning before, selecting the right tests to run for every build is extremely critical to reduce build times. So test intelligence does exactly that. It looks at which tests were touched by the piece of code being built, and then it creates a graph of it, and then it runs only those tests that are relevant. In 2023, we started investing in GenAI, and we launched GenAI for different SDLC tasks. And then early this year at Unscripted, our event, we announced AI assistants. A lot of companies are going with the agentic approach, and we also feel that's the right way. So we created multiple agents for different stages of SDLC. So talking about the different agents, currently we have AI Code Assistant, which helps developers, AI QA Assistant, which helps the QA team or the testing team, AI DevOps Assistant, which helps the DevOps engineers, FinOps Assistant, which helps with cloud cost management, as well as AppSec Assistant, which helps with security issues. And we have more coming in. So let's get into each of these agents into more detail, and then we'll also see the demo for each of these agents. Okay, so let's start off with the Code Assistant. Code Assistant is something you all might be familiar with. So it does all the things that the current solutions in the market offer, which is code completion. It also offers explanation of code. So chat on demand is something which is shown on the screen, and Patrick will also demo that. On top of that, we also talked about reducing toil across the SDLC and code repo. For code repo, we said that onboarding new developers or understanding the code is extremely important. So semantic search, which is using natural language to understand the code, is something that we do. And then we also automate repetitive tasks like summarizing PRs and stuff like that. So with that, Patrick, if you don't mind doing a quick demo for the Code Assistant.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a repository here for the Go Witness, which is a Go implementation of a witness client. And what Witness is a authorization or a testing tool to make sure that every stage of a creation of a artifact or a container is signed by the various things. So a CI pipeline can sign that, a security test can sign that container, and everything goes through. And by the end of the thing, before it gets deployed, you have those attestations of all of the different parts that have signed off on that. And right now, this Go Witness is integrated with GitHub, GitLab, all the different CLI or CI tools out there. So I'm going to go through the steps of adding one for Harness within this repo. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and search for this code to figure out where I need to implement this in my code base. So I'm going to say, where is the tester code for GitLab? So I just use a natural language search to actually search my code base, find out where that is, and then I can take that and go to my browser or my IDE and work on that. So you can see there are a couple of files here where it's implemented. There's an SLSA Go file, there's a GitLab Go file, and those are the places that I need to look for doing my code. So instead of just doing a keyword search on GitLab, I'm actually going to use natural language to find the code that I need to modify for this. So now when I switch to my IDE, I've got the GitLab Go file, and I've also got the SLSA file open as well. So my first thing I'm going to do is add a folder for Harness, and then I'm going to quickly add a harness.go file. And if you look here, GitLab or GitHub has a test file as well, so I'm going to add that quickly as well for Harness. Okay, so normally I would go through and then do a bunch of copying and pasting and kind of moving that around. But instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is go into my Harness AI Code Assistant and use the chat functionality here to actually ask it to help me write that. So if I say, paste on GitLab.go, write a new attester package for Harness. Okay, so this understands the context. It's been optimized with the prompt and everything, so I don't have to worry about creating a prompt to do this with an OpenAI window or anything. I can just go directly into here, and it's all within context. Let me make that a little wider for you. Okay, so now that I've got this sample code, I'm going to copy that code, go to my Harness Go file, just paste that in to there. So now I've got the start. It didn't build the entire attester for me, but it actually built the groundwork for that. I'm also going to come in here and put this into my test file and then right click and generate test. So the Harness Code Assistant's also going to generate the test I need for this attester in there. So now I've got that done. And then the last thing I need to do is kind of go in here. Oops, I want to save this before I leave. And if you notice here, each of the different providers have a case function here. So I'm going to add that case function. Oops. So it generates that, and that's going to generate the other one. So now I've got everything generated for my test as well. And then one last step here, I'm going to copy or select this code and generate comments. So I'm actually going to document my code as I go through here. And I don't have to do that manually. I just do that and it automatically pops up for me. So now that I've saved that and I've generated all my code and I've got the beginnings for that, I'm going to go and update and push this code back up into my repo. Publish that branch. And then the last step of this is, as a developer now, I need to go through and create a pull request for those changes that I made. So if I select my webinar branch, I've got a pull request, and I can actually automatically generate the summary and the explanation for what that pull request does based on all of the change sets that were put into that, as well as my commit messages for that. So it automatically generates that for me. And now when I create the pull request, I don't have to go through and do any of that. So it reduces the amount of just labor of writing things for me. I can quickly get through this, and I don't waste my time writing things and helping collaborate with other developers on that. And that's kind of a end-to-end loop of creating that attester for Harness with that. That's not the end of it, but that is a very general demo of it within a couple minutes, getting that off the ground.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. All right, so we talked about the code assistant. Now let's talk about the QA assistant. So our QA assistant is essentially built with the purpose to simplify and automate testing, as well as reduce the maintenance associated with testing. We have done a lot of internal benchmarking, as well as a lot of customers have used our QA assistant, and they have seen 10x faster test creation, 70% less maintenance for tests. And all of this eventually result in 5x increased release cycle, which is what every organization aims to do, which is faster releases. The QA assistant, you can create an end-to-end test by just using natural language prompts. So for applications that change dynamically, it prevents broken tests because it adapts to those changes automatically. So you don't have to worry about anything. You just state your intent, and the tests are created for that intent, and it adapts automatically for the UI changes. It also provides recommendations to improve test quality, and the recommendations can be steps or assertions. And then finally, it also helps with detecting UI and API errors by automatically validating the application's response. So it's a great feature to have. And again, I'll ask Patrick if he can share his screen and go through the QA assistant demo. And mind you, all of these demos are live, so fingers crossed everything works well.
Yeah. So you should be able to see a Soul Space shoe store now app. Is that showing up correctly? Okay. So this is a new test that I'm creating, and I can go through and add this and basically use it like another functional testing tool to actually record what I do to create that test. But I can also give natural language prompts to actually come in here and run different tests and set up different things. So I can do things like was the selected item added to the cart. So instead of actually doing a assertion and writing any code or anything like that, all I'm doing is writing a simple natural language query to actually test and see if that that functionality worked as intended for that. And so now it's actually tested that. And if I look here, it says, yes, in this case, it was added because there's an added label and it was added to the cart. So that's how I can go through and craft the test with natural language queries. And I don't have to write any code. I don't have to build anything around that. And I can also record things that I do, but I don't even have to record things. I can actually give it prompts to do things as well. So if I look at an existing test here, these are added with natural language. So add 4-star items under $50. Did the 3 items get added? You know, are they in the cart? Are the items under $50? So all of these questions are just natural language. There's nothing defined in the test that's static for that. And as you'll see here, I'm also telling it to fill out the shipping information. It doesn't care what's in that shipping information. All it knows is it needs to fill out that form. Which is a great thing instead of having, that's when Chinmay mentioned broken tests. Like if a new form field gets added or a new field gets added, then my test fails because I don't have it set up anymore. So now it's running through that and it added 3 items to the cart. It's going through. Okay, it's adding the second one. So it's going through and doing all these steps automatically for me. It doesn't have to be prompted. I didn't have to write any code for this. And now it's validating the test worked. And then the last thing it's going to do is go through, and you can see that it's creating test data for me based on the input types for those fields. I don't have to prompt it with test data or have that test data created. It's generating that test data for me, which is a very big part of coding or testing and creating these integration tests across that. So now you can see that the test is almost done. And now it's done. It put the order through, and it's done the entire test without anything coded, all from natural language prompts to generate those functional tests. Sorry, not functional test, integration test. So that's a very quick overview of the QA assistant.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. And then finally, what Harness does the best, which is the DevOps side of things. We also have the AI DevOps Assistant. DevOps Assistant essentially helps you create pipelines in seconds with natural languages. So as Rohan and I were mentioning, creating pipeline is a big toil, and then essentially it depends on your tech stack. So with Harness has all the context, so it can easily create pipelines. And it can also give a lot of recommendations on how to improve those pipelines and also help debug the pipeline failures based on the context that it has. So Rohan, if you don't mind giving a short demo of the DevOps Assistant.
Yeah, for sure. Let me share my screen. Okay, so the way this experience works is we hook in with our kind of our pipeline and experience here, and it has, the AI assistant has context of, you know, all the objects that you've created in your project. So it knows like the services, the environments, the various kind of stages you've configured. So the way this will go is like you'll say create with Harness AI, and we can say today I will deploy let's say deploy service front end. So I have a front end service already created. So we can create a pipeline that will build and deploy this pipeline or the service. And what you'll see here is we're able to generate the pipeline. You'll see we have a build stage, we have our deploy stage, and you'll see here that, you know, I have all these various steps and a rolling deployment step. So we can generate pretty much the entire pipeline for you. And then on top of that, you'll notice we have suggestions here. So especially for a first-time pipeline builder, you generally don't know what best practices are, especially when you're in an when you're new to using like any kind of CI/CD tool. So based off, our experience working with customers over the last like 8 to 10 years, we've actually been able to seed some common patterns. So it helps you get started. So like you could say, I want to add an approval stage. And so we will add, a step with some security and approval checks for you to introduce into the pipeline. And you can see a nice little YAML diff of exactly what we're going to add. So we can apply the change here, and you could save the change here. Oh, sorry, I've already saved it. And so then on top of that, we can do an enhance with AI, and then you could say, send a Slack notification. I want to update this with a Slack notification. And it will add and remove certain functionalities so that we can introduce just a Slack notification being sent. And then you can approve it that way. And with that, you can actually modify the pipeline at design time to make sure that it has all the requirements you need without having to go and click in through the UI, figure out what you want, navigating through the studio. It's just a great way to kind of assist you in building the common things. And then if you want to go deep, you can obviously navigate into a step and essentially manipulate it how you need to. And with that, that's a short demo of the AI DevOps Assistant. Back to you, Chinmay.
All right. Thanks, Rohan. So that's what we wanted to cover in this session. A quick CTA, we have another webinar on AI. So since we are investing in AI so much, we have a lot of webinars coming. This is more of a thought leadership webinar. So the philosophy around Gen AI and how it should be used in software development lifecycle. The panel is awesome. Jean Kim, who is a well-renowned author, also wrote books like The Phoenix Project, is on the panel. Then we have our CEO, Jyoti, as well as our field CTO, Nick. So all of these three would definitely be talking about Gen AI, and I definitely highly recommend all of you to join this session. So with that, we can move towards the Q&A. I see a couple of questions come in, so probably I'll take those. And Rohan and Patrick, feel free to answer these questions. The first question is, I've been thinking of using Gen AI for doing coding help with our Zendesk front-end portal. How do you leverage access to Gen AI to employees without compromising giving away state secrets, as it were, in general, by giving info to Gen AI to use? Anything you give to Gen AI can be retained. How do you secure what you share with Gen AI? So I can take a first stab at it, and then Patrick and Rohan, feel free to add on to it. So our approach to Gen AI, we have customers in the federal space as well as enterprise space. So definitely privacy and security is top of mind for us. Our approach with Gen AI is we only train on your data. So the training doesn't happen on external data. So in that way, we make sure that everything is secure. We also make sure that the models that are deployed are within your own controlled infrastructure, essentially. So if that's what we recommend doing, not using models that are public or use public data to train. So essentially hosting your own models, be it in your own cloud environment or self-hosted. And then that way you can also guarantee security and not give away state secrets. Rohan, Patrick, anything to add there?
Yeah. So actually, an analogy. So we actually, our support engine today, for example, when you ask a question to it in the Harness product, we host our own instance of an AI model, and we've trained it on all the harness docs and all of our, Jira bug tickets. So it knows the problems and the resolutions. So then when a user asks a question from a support vector, it's only learning and taking data from the data set that's provided. So you can really constrain what is being sent and what it's learning on. And on top of that, you can also have a layer in front, which when you send like a support request, you can also check to make sure it's like contextually related to the actual objective of getting support or getting data off a support ticket or whatnot. You can also do a layer in front of it to filter the query out.
Awesome. Thanks, Rohan. And then another question we have here is, what methods does Harness AI use to make sure of ethical and unbiased processing of NLP data? And how does the system detect and mitigate biases in this analysis? Rohan, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So in terms of bias, the data that we're working off really doesn't really have that kind of like sentiment like in that sense. It's pretty binary. It's because we're working on pipeline stages and step data, and basically using existing configurations and different patterns. It's not like there's an opinionated answer. It's more, these are the fixed structures that we know about, and we can stitch a pipeline together based off exactly what you say. There's not really much room for interpretation. We might forget us adding a step or a stage, but it's not like we have an opinion on the response. Essentially, it's more the system has learned various patterns, and it's just kind of stringing together different patterns. And then in terms of a feedback loop, if you think the way we're stitching a pipeline together is not good, or it's not meeting your standards, you can obviously give us a sentiment response saying, hey, this pipeline did not meet my criteria, please regenerate another response. And so that's kind of how it is. The data we work off is very like binary in that sense. These are all fixed constructs in our system.
Got it. Cool. I hope that answers that question. And then one final question is, how do you measure the impact of AI in the SDLC? Yeah, this is definitely very important. Measuring the impact of AI is relatively new field, I think. So there has been a lot of investment made in that. From a harness perspective, one of the things that we do is we have an AI productivity insights, which essentially helps you measure the impact of using AI versus not AI, or using different AI agents, and how does that affect developers' productivity, developer sentiment, etc. So definitely one of the features that we have been working on and investing quite a bit, because we want to make sure that AI is not just being used for the sake of it. It's actually effective and it makes people productive. I think those are all the questions we had. So if there are no more questions, then back to you, Scott.
Okay, excellent. Well, Chinmay, Rohan, and Patrick, thanks. Great presentation. Great demos. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to let those guys go. And we do have one more piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Anna Shirley from South Carolina. So congratulations to Anna Shirley. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Harness for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.